What is going on, gunfighters? Welcome to Gunfighter Life. You want to hear about some hidden gems in the ammunition world? Well, then stay tuned for this episode of Gunfighter Life, where we talk about guns, ammunition, gunfighting, tactics, the right way, with God Almighty at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. I am blessed and humbled to be your host. If it's not your first rodeo, scroll down, like, subscribe, leave a review. You can also check out goodshepherdtraining.com. Going to leave out the bio. Let's just get into some good options for hidden gems in the ammunition world. Now, the first two are going to be handgun rounds from Federal. And I'm acquainted with these from my time in law enforcement. The first one is going to be 9BP. Not the coolest, tacticalest name, but that's kind of why it's a hidden gem. It's not got the marketing hype. Black Talon, Dragon Slayer 5000, ultra high velocity, hyper invasive. It doesn't have that. It's 9BP. Federal 9BP is a good defensive hollow point option. Unlike many other options that come in this little teeny box with a bunch of pretty lettering, shiny labels, it comes in a fairly plain box. If I remember correctly, kind of a gray and blue. It says Federal 9BP LE, but it comes in 50 rounds. And I don't like talking about prices with inflation the way that they are, but it's much more affordable. So if you're looking for a good go-to defensive round that you can afford and you can train with a little bit, because you should make sure your defensive ammo shoots point of aim, point of impact. It's a good 115 grain option, which is the most common option. It's a good street proven round. Now, it's not the latest and greatest, but I have used it, and I have used it as a police officer. It's a good round. It's been around a while. This one is a standard pressure. It's got a very similar profile to many common practice round. So if you can find it and it shoots, say, point of aim, point of impact for you with a similar just Federal target load M115, then that's a win. Nickel plated, I do believe it has a very good case. It's a good, well-performing round. Federal 9BP LE. If you want to kind of Tim the Toolman tailor it and give it, more power, there's Federal 9BP LE. And this was one of my go-to rounds as a law enforcement officer, especially when I got to pick. This Federal 9BP LE is a +P+, which means it's not certified by SAMI. It's a hot rod. It's a Federal factory load, but it's hot. I would use it in a fully supported chamber. I ran mine in Smith & Wesson M&Ps. I remember contacting Federal at the time before I started doing high volume round count with this and asked them what the PSI was, and I wish that I could remember it to tell it to you now, but I'm not 100% sure. That was maybe circa 2009. Right now I don't remember the exact PSI for that exact load, but she was hot. It was hotter than +P. It's a hot load. Federal 9BP LE. Much like its counterpart, it's 115 grain. It comes in a 50 round box. It's got a lot of street cred. It's kind of one of the better known of the classic defensive law enforcement cartridges. Again, it's not the latest and greatest. It's, I think, a few decades old. I think the stuff that I have was from the 90s maybe when I was shooting it. And it worked great. It was a great round. It's a great 115 grain hot load if you like running the +P. Now, in general, I'm not the biggest fan because you give up some. Now, when I was a cop and I got a bunch of this ammo and that was part of my job was to shoot it and train with it, I was one of the trainers, right? Then it didn't really matter because the price of my practice ammo was kind of a moot point because I could get it and shoot it. So you're probably not, unless you're hand loading, getting a practice load that has the same recoil, impulse, point of aim, point of impact. But If you want a really hot rod load for 9mm that doesn't cost an arm and a leg and is known, it's got the street cred for being effective, that 9BPLE. Not the coolest name, not the coolest packaging, but a street proven hot 9mm round, especially if you're the kind of guy that likes the lighter weight 115 grain at a screaming high velocity. You're talking getting up into like 357 SIG territory. Look at that load. It's a hot load. 9mm plus P plus. Federal 9BPLE. Kind of hidden gems in the handgun world. Next, let's talk about hidden gems in the shotgun world. You'll know if you've listened for any length of time that I'm a big fan of number 4 buck. It's kind of my go-to hunting load. I shot my biggest bear thus far with number 4 buck. It's a big bear. Maybe I'll make that picture the show notes picture if I remember. If you watch on listen on Spotify rather, probably not just staring at the picture the entire time. That'd be kind of weird. But if you listen on Spotify, Spotify gives the option to change the thumbnail for individual episodes. Some other platforms like iTunes generally don't do that, but I'll try and make that the thumbnail. But I like number 4 buck. Kind of my go-to is the 3-inch Remington. It's a green and yellow box, classic load, 3-inch Magnum, 41 pellet. Yes, 41 pellet of number 4 buck. As opposed to your common standard 9 pellet, double up buck. Or if you go to a Magnum 12 pellet, you're talking 41 pellets. Now, they're not as big, but it's still a buckshot load. I'm not talking number 4 bird, right? Number 4 bird and number 4 buck are totally different. It's kind of like 22 LR and 223, right? They might sound similar, 22, 223, but they're not the same. They're not even close. Number 4 bird and number 4 buck are not the same. I'm not advocating you use number 4 bird shot like a turkey load for home defense. I'm not advocating that at all. I have seen firsthand what bird shot does to a human being, and it is nasty, but I would not choose it as a home defense load. I know some people would advocate that. I do not. You are free to disagree. I'm talking about number 4 buckshot, not number 4 birdshot. That Remington, 3-inch Magnum, 41 pellet, number 4 buck. Been around for a long time. It's a good load. And I think it's so old and so classic, and a lot of people gravitate towards the double up buck, that it's kind of forgotten. But it is, I think, a hidden gem in the shotgun world. Now, very similar to number 4 buck. Next thing I'm going to tell you is really a hidden gem. I didn't find out about it until fairly recently in my shotgunning journey. But it's triple T shot, TTT. I don't know why this exists in conjunction with number 4 buck. I can only surmise that perhaps there are some countries where you're not allowed to have a shotgun loaded with bird shot, where you're allowed to hunt but not have defensive stuff. So they might consider buckshot, not okay. Because I've seen it in loads kind of made for other countries. But TTT shot, I've seen it in MagTech, which is, if you don't know, MagTech, I believe is Brazilian made. Maybe there's some Latin American countries where that's the case. But if you look at the diameter of number 4 buck and TTT. Now, verify this for yourself, but I believe that number 4 buck is around 24 caliber. I believe it. TTT shot is, I believe it's 22 caliber. It's still a beefy round, right? This is not turkey shot. This is not goose shot. At least not, I don't think it's legal here in America for most places. It's a good all-around load, especially if you want like a good all-around load for around a farmstead, around a homestead, the back of a truck gun, where you might want it for defense. You might want it for coyote or fox or something like that. It's a good all-around load, 22 caliber. Again, I'm not talking number 4 birdshot, right? That's a far different thing. It's 22 caliber TTT shot. Again, I've seen it loaded mostly in some of the foreign ammo, especially in 20 gauge. So if you're looking for kind of a hidden gem in the 20 gauge world, they may load it in 12 gauge too, but I've seen it in 20. That's kind of a hidden gem, that triple T shot, 3T or TTT shot, 22 caliber. Patterns very well out of my 20 gauge. It's a good load. TTT shot, I'm familiar with the MagTech. I think there's some other people that load it. 22 caliber, and again, number 4 buck is 24 caliber. And again, I've taken my biggest bear with number 4 buck. I've also done a fair bit of deer hunting with number 4 buck. Number 4 buck is legit. It's my favorite. It's my go-to for most things. Not everything. Like, it's not my truck gun load. For truck gun, where I might have to be shooting through car doors and stuff, I choose double-aught buck. But for most things, I go to general home defense, hunting load, medium to large game. I like number 4 buck. I like 41 pellets over 9 or 12 pellets. That's just me. You do you. But I think they're a hidden gem. Also, maybe lesser known than the Federal Flight Control. And the Federal Flight Control is an awesome load. I'm a big fan. Used those in law enforcement. Used them as a civilian. Federal Flight Control. Most commonly in double-aught buck. They come in 9 pellet. They come in 8 pellet. There's some other loads. But that Federal Flight Control is kind of a game changer if you're shooting it through a defensive shotgun. Now, these are meant to be shot through open and maybe improved cylinder bore. You start shooting them through a tighter choke, you may get worse, not better results. But the Federal Flight Control are absolutely phenomenal. My old Benelli M1 Super 90 that I sold and wish I had kept, because I just assumed all shotguns were that awesome. All defensive shotguns were that awesome. It's a great gun. It would, with a cylinder bore, no choke at all, put all 9 pellets on a USPSA silhouette target at 50 yards with the flight control wad. That's an awesome load. A lot of people know about that load. Hornady also makes a similar load. I don't know if the wads, because the wad, the part that holds the shot together going out of the barrel, I don't know if it's exactly the same, but it's very similar. They may have different patterns. They may be slightly different. I've never cut them both apart and looked at them under a microscope. However, the way they function in principle for practicality is very similar. And that's the Hornady Versatite loads. Those are good loads. Also use those. Also like those. And they make a coyote load and none other than number 4 buck. That's an awesome load too. But if you can't find or having trouble finding, maybe your shotgun just doesn't like, because shotguns are very particular. They're kind of like women. You might have 2 5'4" blonde women that have totally different personalities, right? Shotguns can be the same way. You could have 2 seemingly identical Remington 870s that pattern vastly differently. Same choke, same barrel length, everything. And they could shoot completely differently, like completely different loads. Just by the nature of the shotguns. They're very individualistic that way. You may find, for whatever reason, that flight control is not going to work for you. You may decide to look for that Hornady Versatite wad. It's a good other option that I think is lesser known in the shotgun world. Okay, moving on from that to the rifle world. With all the new marketing and all the new hype around rifle rounds, some ones I think are forgotten. Maybe not hidden gems, maybe a forgotten gem is a better one for these, but the old Remington Corlock 180 grain. Right? If your rifle likes that load and it shoots well out of your rifle and you hunt at reasonable ranges inside of 300 yards, 350 yards, 180 grain, 30-06 Remington Corlock, that'll take pretty much anything. It'd certainly kill a big grizzly bear in Alaska, but I would bump up to the 220 grains for that. But anything shy of big coastal brown bears in Alaska, that 180 grain Remington Corlock is a good, solid load in 30-06. If you have a 30-06 and you're looking for a load, that wouldn't be a bad place to start. You may decide you want something else. You want 150, 165 grain, but that old 180 grain Remington Corlock, who knows how many beasts that thing has slain. So don't think that you need some super high BC bullet. Again, if you hunt at reasonable ranges, because I'm gonna say, for practicality, for all intents and practical purposes, inside of 300 yards, BC, between a moderate BC and a really good BC bullet, is inconsequential to you. I'd pick the load that had the better terminal performance, which this load has in abundance, and shoots well out of your rifle. It's a classic, that 30-06. You know what else is a classic? The 30-30. Is there really anything more classic and American than 30-30? The 30-30, like apple pie. Very classic American. You're probably familiar with it mostly, and it's 150 and 175 grain loadings. They're really common, and there's nothing wrong with them. Those are great loads, but those wouldn't be hidden gems. Those are kind of the staple. They're kind of the cereal crop of the food pyramid of the 30-30. Now, these are not the only manufacturers that likely make this, but both Buffalo Boar and Barnes make a 190 grain load for the 30-30 Winchester. The Buffalo Boar from their website lists a 190 grain at 2,061 feet per second out of a Winchester Model 94. That's no slouch. And I wouldn't necessarily go with the hottest one. I would look for the bullet construction and see which bullet did what I wanted it to do. Because just because bullets are the same grain weight doesn't mean they were designed to do the same things. But I would look at the bullet construction and the job that I wanted it to do. But if you wanted a little bit heavier bullet, then traditional in a 30-30 for something a little bit bigger than, let's say, a white-tailed deer. Don't think you need to run out and grab some Super Magnum, some 300 Win Mag, right? The 30-30 has put a lot of big animals down. And 30-30 190 grain is even better than a more traditional 170 grain. So it's kind of a hidden gem. I don't think a lot of people think about the 190 grain in the 30-30. Next, we're going to move into the world of rimfire. Now, I'm a big fan of this load. I use it quite a bit, especially in kind of my go-to 22 training handguns for a couple of reasons. It's affordable, and if I'm doing high-volume training, I like that. It's also pretty hot, which if you're shooting a 22 semi-auto, that's a big deal, right? In my experience, semi-automatic 22s much prefer hotter ammo than standard velocity ammo, because you lose quite a bit of velocity as compared to what you would get out of, let's say, a Ruger 10/22 or most rifles and carbines. And you need it to cycle, and a lot of those 22 semi-autos with the reciprocating slides, where you got to move that mass back and forth. And in my experience, again, the hotter loads tend to do that pretty well. Now, the CCI mini mags are the standard. Again, they're the grain staple crop of the food pyramid of the 22, if we use that same analogy. However, there is another. Aguila Super Extra. My guns tend to really like this ammunition. Again, it's affordable. It's fairly hot for a 22 long rifle, so it works really well in my 22 semi-auto training handguns. It's also fairly accurate. Probably not as accurate as like an Ely or like an Olympic designed round, but that's not what it's for. Also a decent hunting round. It's a good round. The 38 grain hollow point, it's a good hollow point round. Advertised velocity on the box I'm looking at is 1280. That's pretty hot. And I'm sure that is optimistic for a carbine, not for a handgun. And it certainly works in carbines. It certainly wouldn't be a bad choice for a Ruger 10/22. But again, I really like it for high volume training in my semi-automatic 22 handguns, which I use to train a lot to save money on ammo when I'm working on like the handgun fundamentals. Anyway, it's a really, really good load, and I think it's often overlooked. It's nowhere near, I don't think, as common or as popular as thought about as the 22 mini mags. So those are some thoughts on some hidden gems in the ammunition world. If you're a hand loader, that opens up many, many doors and many opportunities to customize, but when I was doing a lot of competition shooting, my go-to kind of load was the extreme bullets. If you are looking for good, affordable bullets to load, I would recommend, and I get no kickback, no sponsors on the show, you guys probably know that, but Extreme Bullets, I used those for years and won more competitions with them than I can remember. They make the common handgun bullets. They also make .223 bullets. They're really good, affordable bullets. A lot of them are just copper plated, which is great for your standard velocity handgun rounds. They're a great bullet. I think Rainier is more well known. They're not really a hidden gem, but Extreme Bullets, I think they are a hidden gem. And they're good bullets. Again, I've won more competitions with them than I can remember. You might want to check them out. Also, if you want some like manufactured, reloaded, but not by you, you might look at Freedom Munitions. Sometimes they have some good ammunition like that. And also Wilson Combat. They're known, Wilson Combat is known for some premium handguns, but you may not know they also manufacture and sell ammunition. So if you're looking for a specific load and you've been looking everywhere and you can't find it, you may look and see if Wilson Combat offers a comparable load. A lot of people, I think, know about them for, again, their high-end handguns, but maybe not so much for their ammunition. So those are some thoughts on hidden gems in the ammunition world. I hope you enjoyed this. And remember, if you're going to spend a little bit of money on ammo, hopefully you value this knowledge as well, and you'll want to support the podcast. There should be a Patreon link in the show notes. Again, for what you're going to spend on a single box of ammo, maybe consider going over to Patreon and contributing that much a month. Just once a month. Just whatever you would spend on a box of ammo. Consider supporting the show. This show is supported by viewers like you. And a thank you to all the patrons that step up and support. I am very blessed and humbled by your support. Anyway, with that, the tactical tip of the day. Tactical tip today is going to be a little bit about hunting. Predator hunting. A good thing to have on your outdoors hunting expeditions, reconnoitering, recon expeditions, just going out for a hike. A predator call, specifically a dying rabbit call. There's not much in the predator world that won't go after a dying rabbit. So if you've been hunting for something else, haven't seen much, and you say, hey, I might want to try to call in a bobcat, a coyote, a mountain lion, a wolf if you have the tags. But in many places you can just shoot coyotes without tags, a lot of times without a season or anything. So if you're out for a hike and you decide I'm about to start heading back, maybe sit down for 15 minutes and blow that predator call. It's a good thing to have. Keep one in the baby bug out bag, which if you listen for any length of time, you're likely familiar with. Maybe you want to keep it in the center console of your truck. I think I also have one in my truck somewhere, center console or glove box. Anyway, a dying rabbit call. Again, there's not much in the predator world that won't go after a dying rabbit as kind of a meal of opportunity. So having one of those with you, even if you're not specifically going out to hunt coyotes or bobcat or whatever else. Anyway, that's your tactical tip of the day. Keep one of those handy. They don't cost a lot of money. They don't take up a lot of space. You're hiking around. You think this is a really good spot to maybe ambush a coyote. I don't know if your brain works like that. Sometimes mine does when I'm out for a walk, a hike. It's a good thing to have if you care about shooting coyotes and other predators and things like that. That's your tactical tip of the day, your tactical verse of the day. That reminds me of a verse in the Bible on David, a man after God's own heart, a mighty warrior. David says to Saul, "Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, since he has defiled the armies of the living God." David, a man after God's own heart, slayer of man and beast and giant, good with projectile and melee weapons, struck Goliath in the head with a stone and cut his head off with his own sword. That's a man's man right there. A warrior, a hunter, a slayer of man and beast, and a man after God's own heart. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.